Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started because I've just had the 2 thumbs up from Brad and I have to do everything he says, penalty of being beaten at the end of this. So welcome to this really awesome session. My name is Alana Hewson. I'm the Managing Director of Oregon Destination Association, and we are really happy to be doing this. I don't know how many of you attended the Oregon Destination Association conference that was in January, but this won't be an exact repeat. But the reason that we were asked to come and bring this esteemed panel before you today was to change up and expand upon some really good dialogue that started in January. And that dialogue centered around destination organizations and the M in the destination, what was marketing organization, and then morphed into destination marketing and management organization. And then people said, why do we have an M at all? Because we're really all just destination organizations, because the role of what DMOs do is expanding and evolving. And we've heard it in the sessions this morning, from destination development to sustainability to all of the new vernacular that is rolling out. Then we come full circle to that and say, well, why do we keep changing our name every 5 to 10 years? Why don't we just stick with what we're doing and understand that that's a really big umbrella and the work is going to continue to evolve. But every time we change our name, we have to explain why we're changing our name. So that's the conversation today. And we have 5 amazing people that I'm pretty sure need no introduction, except I get to introduce them anyway. What we started with was, I said, okay, everybody send me a sentence or two, kind of your abbreviated background, because pretty much everyone in the room is going to know you. And I was cracking up because the folks that I've worked with I've been in the industry now close to 30 years. But the folks that I've worked with the longest had like the really traditional bios, and they're like, here's a couple sentences from my bio. And then the folks that for me were a little bit more new and hip had these really, really clever intros that they sent to me. So what I'm going to do, instead of reading their intros, I'm going to put them on the spot, and they all get to riff their own intro, and then we're going to have a vote from the audience as to who has the best intro. But I do need to do a little bit of housekeeping, and that is because these sessions are all being shared virtually for folks that could not be here. The idea of the conversation today is just that. It's going to be a discussion with this panel. So while they have some terrific case studies to share with you about how their organizations have evolved as DMOs and some of the innovative strategies that they're putting into the marketplace today that set them apart in this space, and we're lucky that Oregon has always really taken a leadership role in being innovative with our organizations, obviously led by our statewide organization, Travel Oregon. But we want it to be a discussion format. So if you're doing something in your community or with your DMO or your RDMO, and you want to talk with these folks about why they have created the programs they've created and how they're executing them, let's make it a discussion. Catherine has a microphone, and in order for the folks tuning in virtually to be able to hear your question or comment, it's got to be done through the mic. So we'll try to make this flow and be very expedient, but just shoot a hand in the air. And if you want to just do it impromptu and we don't have time to get the mic to you, just bear with me because I'll repeat your question into the mic. So without any further ado, we'll start with Kevney.
Of course you would. My name's Kevney Dugan. Lived in Bend for the last 16 years or so, and my passions are running and riding the trails of Central Oregon. I have 2 beautiful kids and a lovely wife who I care about the most. And in my spare time, I am the president and CEO of Visit Bend.
That was good. Hi, I'm Jeff Knapp. I am the executive director for Visit McMinnville. I have the best job in the world, just getting to tell everybody about all my friends that are doing amazing, cool things in my community. And I don't know what else to say, so I'm going to pass it on.
That is not what Jeff wrote. His was really good. I might have to go back and read his because it was really good.
Hi, I'm Samara Phelps. I'm Executive Director for Oregon's Mount Hood Territory. We're Clackamas County Tourism. And I strive to be Kevney and have my job be my part-time instead of my ongoing brain. But with that said, I have a passion for this work because of the collaboration. And as part of 3 regions, I see many of your faces in our opportunities to collaborate, but it's bringing those experiences to life for our visitors and our residents alike that really drives me, because I want to be a traveler all the time. And so thank you for having us here.
Hi, I'm Kerry Westland. I grew up in the industry in Alaska, and I moved here as a very, very, very young adult 25 years ago.
An infant.
And thought I was going into real estate, but the Travel Lane County job opened up, and it was a perfect fit, similar to what I'd been doing in Alaska. I love to run. I'm an outdoor adventurer. Love local food and beverage, and all of those are abundant within the Eugene, Cascades, and Coast region, so I'm happy there.
Hi, I'm Bill Perry. I'm the lobbyist for the restaurant and lodging industry. I started in '96, so I was a very, very young adult. Some people say I'm still very immature for my age. And I started my own lobby firm in 2014, I believe, which still do the restaurant lodging stuff. And I actually am envious of the Travel Oregon because they took that slightly exaggerated, and I thought that would be a good lobbyist kind of catch laying, only slightly exaggerated. So I live in Canby, but I will say that my 2 loves are, my family is obviously incorporated in this, are the Oregon State Beavers and to teach little kids pitching. Those are my 2 loves. So I get paid for one, I don't for the other, but that's good.
Okay, thanks everybody. So Bill is on the panel this morning because one of the things that bubbled up the last time we were having this discussion was with all of these innovative programs that are being rolled out in destinations, we do have requirements set in state statute over how transient lodging taxes are utilized. And we always have to go back to the law. Which isn't always entirely sexy, but it is necessary. So lots of folks have said, hey, you are doing incredibly innovative programming. The first 4 on the panel are going to go through some of the programs that they've developed that have utilized TLT. And they're also going to tie in how it relates to the legal use of the lodging tax. But if you've got any questions about that, these are the experts in it. And then we have the officer on the end to tell you, yes, that will be okay. Or no, that might be outside the parameters. You're going to need to check in with your lodging communities about that. He does. We do. It's the ejection seat. So, be careful what you ask. And there are more chairs. So for those of you standing, if you want to sit, please jump in and make yourselves comfortable because this is going to be a fun session. Yes, Kevin, your question.
I was just wondering, it's warm in here. If that door opens, do you want to open it?
Yes, Kevin's question was, can we open the door? Yes, we can.
Yay, Kevin. And I'm out.
Okay. This is just kind of the riff we were hoping for with this session. So we're going to jump in, and again, a lot of this was spearheaded by Todd's opening remarks this morning, where the industry is going, what's a part of the transformational strategy, the continued work that will be done with the input of the industry in fine-tuning the transformational strategy. All of the folks that you see here are also going to be a part of that. Obviously, we're all invited to be a part of that as well. Oregon Destination Association has been invited to participate in the review panel, so we're very pleased to help represent the voice of DMOs on that panel. And I just want to say on behalf of ODA, please communicate with me. Let me know what is on your mind, what you would like to see the review panel consider. We've had many smart people say, everybody that is a stakeholder in this industry wants to see themselves in that transformational plan. So let me know how you see yourself, and I will try to help convey that and make sure that that becomes a part of the final plan. And I know that's Travel Oregon's goal, is to make sure that we all feel included in that process. So we're going to jump right in. And Kevin, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're right next to me here. So if you could talk through the case study that you have developed within the city of Bend. It was one of the groundbreaking, I believe, programs within destination development, and how that came about and how you're executing it now and where you see it going in the future.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So what Alana's referring to is the recently developed Bend Sustainability Fund. And before I jump into that, I want to touch quickly on sort of this concept of management versus marketing and what that M looks like. And I think, not to steal the thunder from others, but we often wonder why that M is there. And I think I go back to many years ago, coming out of the housing recession in 2010, and Visit Bend was asked to market as hard as we possibly could to get an economy back on its feet. Then in 2013, we were asked to pass a tax increase of 1.4% that Orla was none too pleased with at the time, to help with police and fire, as well as establish an arts and culture fund. In 2015, we made a decision as an organization to focus on shoulder season and winter marketing. And then most recently, we established the Bend Sustainability Fund. Every one of those examples is an example of a destination marketing management or other term organization adapting to meet the needs of a community. The most recent example of the Bend Sustainability Fund was a framework that took a lot of time. It was working with stakeholders in the communities and hoteliers and restaurateurs who understood that our destination's bread and butter was access to our natural resources. And those natural resources were under threat. We are seeing huge visitation, people loving those places to death, quote unquote. And we felt the need to respond. And that really spearheaded the relationship with Orla, talking through how you use the state statute and what is the substantial use by visitors, or what is a 10-year lifespan of a facility. And in our case, that wasn't a convention center. We had one that was operating, it was working really well. What we didn't have was the industry investing in these natural resources that were our demand driver up front. And so we built an advisory council of stakeholders, local community members. We created a process and a grant program. In its first year, granted out $840,000 to 8 different projects. Some of the more flagship projects that you guys might be aware of are the development of a new outdoor playground at the High Desert Museum, an additional 12 miles of hiking trail up at Mount Bachelor, which was designed to alleviate the pressure of the wilderness permit system going into effect. And there's a whole nother slew of projects, new mountain bike trails, et cetera. But for us, this is what a tourism-related facility looks like. And that's why the program was built. But it didn't happen overnight. We worked tirelessly with the community and stakeholders to make sure we are building a program they supported and also fell in the parameters of the state statute. So I'm going to stop there and pass it off to Jeff.
So, are there any questions for Kevney, or should we go through the case studies and then open it up? And feel free. I'll keep an eye on the audience as well as our panel. If you've got a burning question that you want to ask right in the moment, just shoot up a hand and we'll do it. Otherwise, we'll move through the case studies and then open it up and have a lively discussion. Okay, Jeff.
Okay, hi. So McMinnville was really a very young DMO. We were established, our transient lodging tax wasn't passed until 2013. So, in fact, my board tells me that in the inception of our organization, they had to prove to city council that there was actually an impact of tourism. Why would we even need this? We probably had a $4 billion wine industry at the time, which is now like a $7 billion wine industry. And people were like, really? People come here for that? So, we started in 2015 with a plan very much structured off of Kevney's work, and we were very focused, DMO, Destination Marketing Organization. We are going to deploy all of our resources to make the largest impact with marketing dollars, and that's what we needed to do. It's been very successful. However, we live and operate in a rural community, very small place where everyone knows everyone, and your impact is felt. It's known. We weren't known. We had no trust, and we had a lot of resources compared to other economic development organizations. So, having never had run a DMO, we quickly, it was the idea we were economic development. So we're going to bring this group of folks together, and maybe a lot of you in the room have heard about this, but we started what's called our stable table, and we, for our success, we really had an advocacy role in our community, and we would meet monthly over coffee with our other economic development heads, our chamber, our downtown association, our economic development partnership, And we tied all of our whys together because our organization inherently was threatening some of their identities that we were taking away from them. So I think this is a universal thing where everyone is, we're defensive. We want to protect what we have. It's hard to lean in and sometimes be collaborative. So we did that. We said, you know what, we need the city to embed our work in our plan. And so we, as a collective, said, you know what, we need a strategic plan for our community for 20 years, and the city went out and did that. And we now have hospitality and place-based tourism, amongst a bunch of other things, as one of the top 8 priorities for our city. So now we have a document that says, you know what, regardless of which political candidate gets up on the dais, or we have a new leader here at this organization, we have a direction. And with that laid a foundation. So for us, we were able to do that because I have an amazing Kitchery McGuire running marketing like a boss. And I got to show up and be at every city, show up for relationships and tie the value of what we do to the larger picture. So I don't know that that's extremely innovative, but collaboration is how we've been able to do what we do. And it's allowed us to now start having these conversations. What is the M? We clearly need to do more than just that. It's M, yes, McMinnville. It's the Destination McMinnville organization.
And we're going to tie in your innovative programming in the round of questions, because I got a couple questions for you about your workforce stuff.
Yes, so we start to have conversations about workforce, and we have to be more than food and wine, right? Where's the quality of life? What's the quality? My town welcomes visitors in the sense that they get to have a new coffee shop, but they would love to not have to have visitors. So how do we use visitors to improve the quality of life for the people that live there? And at the end of the day, that's the why behind what we do, and that's why we do it. So.
That's awesome. So Samara, I'm going to set a little context, because I don't think that you mentioned this in your intro, but Samara brings an awesome perspective, and also part of the conversation that's been happening at Oregon Destination Association, and that is most DMOs are private nonprofits that are funded, that have a partnership with their local municipality to manage tourism services and delivery of services funded by transient lodging tax. But we have more than a handful of DMOs in the state that are part of their government, whether that's the city or the county, and they're a department of that government. So questions have bubbled up over time. How do these differing DMOs work together? How are they similar? How are they different? I can say in the most global sense that they are much more alike than not alike. But if any of you have questions about that, we have an expert here when we open it up that can share with you that perspective, both as a county tourism department and also housing the RDMO for their area.
Yes. So the short answer to that is I'm on the struggle bus. Thank you. Thank you. Who's got the sign? I mean, come on, that was a callback. Help me out. But yes, we are a county department, and that comes with many challenges. And I would say the first thing when I think about our work is that I spend a lot of my time doing translation. I translate what we are doing kind of as this room, the destination marketing, the management, the excitement, the experiences, into the bureaucracy. Because as much as the people who work in my organization are my organization being the county, the government entity, are extremely passionate, dedicated service people to their residents and the community. The gloss and the shine of what we do looks fluffy. It doesn't look like work, right? So how do we translate that? And so for us as an organization, part of that is running intercept between my staff, who have beautiful, creative, huge ideas, nimble, responsive, and now let's push this through a government system that needs to be nimble. It needs to drive those things, but it doesn't quite necessarily know how to do that at the speed that those of us that are in the private sector have an opportunity to work, and that our private sector partners need. And that was one thing that was really clear through the pandemic, right? Is that we're looking at operators who are struggling, not tomorrow, not 6 months down the line. They are struggling today. And so we feel that we do a lot of that translation, right? Like we're bringing that up through the community while still keeping the spark and keeping that passion. So the nimble part is what our team, I feel like, does really well. The struggle in the system. The advantage in the system is that for me, for us to have destination considered in any of the county plans, that it is a factor that has gone into it. It may not necessarily be what I agree with, but that it's been part of the discussion is a huge success. And I think that's what we need in all of our communities, regardless of your organizational structure. But you need to be part of other people's plans because we don't own or hold those things. And that's where I get to the M in management, marketing. What do we, McMinnville, what do we want our M, Malala, what do we want our M to be? And I have moved, and my team is here in the room who knows this. I'm cutting the M out of all of our communications just in terms of streamlining it because we're going with destination organization because that's what I bring to the table. And when I sit with transportation providers and I have a management label, they're like, isn't that cute that you're managing something? I'm trying to get 6 buses up a highway that has a 5-hour traffic jam on it. So tell me exactly what it is that you're managing right now. And so for me, that's part of that translation. The destination organization speaks to who we are and the perspective that we're bringing into the work and the collaborations as we go forward. And storytelling and the marketing and all of these things are a big part of what we do. But I feel like if I'm spending a lot of time talking about defining what that work is, I'm not doing a good job of showing them what the value is. So my goal is to show up and show my value and for me to define it. If I can have a year in which another county department doesn't get council to opine, as they like to do, on a subject related to TRT, that's a success for me because that's us getting to come to the table and show our value. And it's not just the value of the TRT or the definition of the ordinance. It's like, okay, what are we trying to accomplish for our community? So that's for us. Translation, I think, is the difference in government. And the other piece is, as one of our partners in Oregon City once said, it's really challenging to be the engine that's supposed to be driving while you're part of the system that's supposed to be regulating, right? Government inherently is kind of like back on its heels like this. And we, as we saw throughout this entire conference so far, are the lean in, push forward, like the whole theme of the conference, forward, right? That's not necessarily the position that a government entity takes. So there's a little bit about our background, and I'm happy to talk about it more. But Kerry, you're next.
Okay, wait, before Kerry starts, because she didn't include this in her introduction, and you probably already know this, but I have to opine for a moment and just say that. I know. I'll talk fast.
Kerry went from not knowing what she was going to say to being like, right.
Yeah, okay. So Kerry served on the Oregon Tourism Commission for 8 years and also served as chair for 2 years and was, in the 29 years that I've been in this industry, one of the most effective chairs of the commission in the history of the commission. So just a thank you to Kerry for your service.
That's really kind. So there's a common theme, and it's interesting because one of the questions on the Ken card this morning was, "What's your core value?" And I was asked that question by Daryl from Klamath Falls, who is sitting next to me, and it was one of our organizational core values is servant leadership, and it's around serving to make others better. And everybody knows that one of my areas is service to industry, right? So I'm always putting that out there. We've got a funder, we're serving that funder, we're making sure that we're meeting the needs of the lodging sector because the lodging sector funds our work. But that's not in isolation. It's about all the elements of the destination that need to hear from us and see our work in action. And we've got several examples of that. Samara was on our team at Travel Lane County for a long time, and she was a big leader for us in this way. We've got a lot of national forests and public agencies, and she would knit those relationships together because for us, like Kevney, those outdoor recreational assets are really core to why people come to our area. And then we just went through this crazy time, and one of the crazy things that we're experiencing more regularly are these wildfires. And so in service to the Mackenzie corridor, Huron comes in with the Regenerative Tourism Project, which we were really happy to work with Travel Oregon and the Cascades Volunteers on. And then we have Oregon 22, which is another example of a client, really. These are all clients, right? We're each other's clients, and we've got all these destination clients, and we're finding ourselves doing all kinds of crazy things, getting ready for the World Athletics Championships, and we're going way beyond our borders. So we're all funded within geopolitical boundaries, and our first primary mission is to serve our local economy, but we all work together too. So we're setting up booking portals that are filling rooms up the valley and down to Roseburg. We're trying to figure out ground transportation with Danielle and Wava's help from communities into the area. We're putting plaques around the state to drive visitation and interest, to learn about Oregonians who've achieved global medals throughout history. So it really is about leaning into the gaps. It doesn't mean you ever really leave the marketing, but you're bringing a lot of other things into the table. And as long as you're remembering to work in service, I think it's going to come out. It's going to come out okay. You just can't forget you got to keep all the balls in the air, and we're all used to doing that. So, okay, grade us, Bill.
Set us straight, Bill, the
Yeah, I was gonna
watchdog of TLT statewide. Thank you very much.
You're asking a C-average liberal arts major to grade you? I don't think that's probably no way. There's been a few themes that have come up, and I kind of want to reinforce them before we get into it. First of all, kind of what we heard today, a personal goal of mine, this is mine, is really what we need to focus on is the shoulder seasons, the full-time employment, that kind of stuff. Because remember, we heard some of the guys, people talk up there today about, they were a bartender and they moved into this, or, what I think that the pandemic reinforced that has been happening in years, especially in some of these more rural communities, is the lack of consistent employment and wages will sometimes take the most valued people we have in our industry and get them to seek different forms of employment. And so from my vantage point, what I would like to see most out of the DMOs is the more we can stabilize, meaning the shoulder seasons and everything else, the more we're going to be able to keep the talented, valued employees in this industry. And so a lot of you guys have heard me talk about this and preach this, is how do we build on the shoulder seasons? Because if you want better housing for our employees, you want health care for our employees, you're not going to do that by raising the lodging tax. You're going to do that by making sure they have as much money in November and February as they do in August. And until their wages become stabilized, we're always going to run that risk of our employees having financial issues or moving out of the industry. So, kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And then the key topic of the M, and should this be in this, I think sometimes it's going to fall under whether you're more of a marketing person or an administrative person, because, obviously from a marketing standpoint, having the M in there doesn't really matter. But from a political standpoint, I would say the management is important, because we always say in politics, if there's a void, somebody's going to fill it. And what I mean by that is, if you're not communicating with your policymakers on what your plan is, I don't care what it is, but if you're not communicating with them what your plan is and what the objectives of that plan is, so how do I build on the shoulder seasons, how do I do that stuff, then the local governments are going to come in and say, look, we've got all this lodging tax, I've got a better use of it. Then all of a sudden your job is to prove them wrong. You need to change the opinion that just has been established. So if you don't have a management strategy of sitting down with your policymakers outside of session, because remember, I think some of you have heard me say this before, if you try to go into session and convince your policymakers on what you're doing, they've got so much stuff going on in their brain, they're not going to retain it. So I think that you guys should either they meet with your board or select members of your DMO twice a year. Just schedule, come into the board meeting, go through your strategic plan or your marketing plan or whatever you want to call it, and make sure they understand what they're doing. Because then if somebody then at a local level or whatever comes in and say, okay, here's this lodging tax proposal, how does it fit into your plan? You've now set your establishment that somebody else has got to change. So from a management standpoint, you need to do that. Doesn't matter what bills are or anything else. It's make sure that policymakers understand what you're doing. And then kind of more to the statute, I will give a story that's happened recently. And I have people from local governments or state governments, and they'll call me up and say, this is what I want to do with lodging tax. And when you look at 2003, or the 2267 and 4146, in my opinion, the fundamental premise of that is, one of them established kind of a local system, and the second one set aside specific dollars for a local, both regional and local system. So I don't even listen to what they say. I just say, have you talked to your locals about it? And then they'll sit there and go, well, I sent them this, or I told them this, and it's just like, okay, if you told them that, then that's not okay. Because I think everybody on this panel wants to do what's best to basically help their community grow. And so if they have an idea and they go into it with an open mind, because basically I told them that the main reason we're going to get upset as an organization is if the locals fight you. So sit down with them, figure out what your goals are, how can they help you achieve your mutual goal, because if they believe it works into a system that's going to help the hotel operators, then we're generally not going to have a problem. You don't have to worry about it. And it's funny because in the past session, I brought up trails. And then I know some people had come up afterwards and said, well, I thought trails were okay. And I think it is a good example because in the last full legislative session, they had something that basically said, I want you to send ODF&W a couple $1 million a year so they can deal with trails. Okay, that's not okay. If ODF&W wants to go to the North Coast or Eugene or someplace else and say, okay, we want a trail system, and those sit there and go, okay, this might bring tourists in or this might bring tourists in, that's fine, because now you're sitting down with them. What is the best use of this resource to achieve both goals? That's good. But just saying we're going to send you a bunch of money and you figure out how to manage it or spend it on administration, that's not okay. And so I'm not going to sit here and say this clearly is something you can't use the money for and this clearly is something you can, because it comes down to what is the objective, and like I said, it comes down to heads and beds and making sure the state, local, and everybody else is working together to achieve the same goals. So, I mean, those basically are what, in my opinion, the statute says, and if you're going to violate either one of those, that's generally where we have gotten into issues. So with that, I'll hand it over and do
That's
questions.
great. Well, and I think, obviously Bill is our industry's boots on the ground in Salem during the legislative sessions and then in between as well, the consummate relationship developer and really the best at what he does in the Capitol. So thank you so much for that. But I think it applies at the local level as well. We all fundamentally know this, and the four folks on the panel have already stressed this. You don't ever want to be surprised by your funding partners. So it is making sure you've got the communications in place ahead of the curve with whatever programs or projects you're putting into the field so that you're driving the conversation instead of someone bringing the conversation to you that's potentially going to divert your resources to programs that might not be aligned with what your vision is for your community. And that's not always easy to do because elected officials look at pockets of money and they want to get their hands on that and they want to drive the direction of it. So I think fundamentally communication is the key for all of this. So as we open it up to discussion, that's the theme that I see resonating among this panel in all of the work you're doing, that communication is at the core of it, developing the relationships, being hopefully ahead of the question as much as possible. And it's never going to be perfect because we can't get into the minds of our elected officials on a regular basis and know what their hot buttons are going to be. But let's open it up now for discussion. And I would love to have the four of you as well expand specifically on some of the programs you're doing, because there is a lot of content there, and bring workforce into this conversation as well, because I think that that's a direction that, oh, I know what I wanted to tee this up with. Coming through the pandemic, one of the things that DMOs, I think most DMOs faced, was the influx of being looked to be the communicators for your entire community. That sometimes the cities and the counties weren't set up to be that communications vehicle, so they were reaching out to their local DMO saying, help us get this word out. Tell us how we need to be talking about this and communicating, not only with visitors, but with the constituency within the community. So that's a whole nother responsibility that has come under the umbrella for DMOs statewide. And I'd love to have some conversation about both the opportunities that's presented, but also the challenges, because I know that nobody's staff size or bandwidth increased under the pandemic. Most of you were doing more with less, and that's a reality for our industry. So let's turn it over. Catherine, do you have the mic? Okay, great. Questions from the floor, and then we're going to continue this discussion.
And I would say, too, as Catherine's seeking a hand out there, I think the key message is that every community, every destination is different, every situation is different. You're not going to walk into a room like this and get a cookie cutter approach that you're going to take home and apply. You're going to have to key in to the value sets of your destination and the issues within your respective areas. And it's going to be different for every one of us at any given time. But we want to talk about what you guys want to talk about.
Any case studies from the floor that we can also share with this? Oh, sorry, Jeff. No, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to just jump in with a few thoughts of things that I'm thinking about. You know, we're here, first of all, thanks to Travel Oregon for having us to talk about this, because essentially we're talking about things that can be really uncomfortable. We're talking about law and should we, could we, what do we need to do to make sure we're not breaking the law, or are we doing the best thing? And those are hard conversations to have, or to justify, what's right for your community. So, I think that what Bill's saying as far as heads in beds, we have a brilliant program that funnels resources to our community. It is a vehicle. For me, my community, that's not the goal. My community could care less about how many people come into our hotels. So it's my job to connect that value. And I think, though, when we show up to engage in conversations with people about caring and the why, we know that it's important, and that's what drives our revenue. But we have to, when I walk into a room, they're just like, yeah, you're the heads and beds guy. And so it stops there, unless I can say, no, we're more than that. You know what? We've got a workforce problem, and you know what? We should maybe use what we're doing, our marketing, to also help regenerative food, or all of these things. This is how we can come to the table. And I think we still have a ways to go to tell that story across the board more effectively, and connect the heads and beds as a second thing. It's the vehicle that allows us to do the impactful work for economic development. And I don't want Orla to kill me, but because it's really cool and important, and we all want to protect that. So we get into a very defensive, protective mode about what does it mean. We don't want that to go away. And until we can have those conversations, I think, we want to control it and not have it happen to us. So.
Right. Right.
Kevin, if you want to.
Oh, I was going to just piggyback on what I was hearing in terms of Bill used the term fill the void. And I think it's a really important concept when you talk about management, or whatever you call yourself. Samara talked about the way in which government is slow to react. We as organizations on the DMO side, we have to be proactive in where we're going. We have to be those leaders on behalf of our community. And sometimes that means pushing into the gray area and challenging that gray area. But I guarantee if you work with your stakeholders locally, and you're honest and open about where you're trying to go, you're going to find support. And I think this is a new a new iteration for tourism, right? It went through this great, incredible growth curve, and it is still doing that in many communities. And with that, the scope of work that's required by DMOs is growing and changing. And we are being a voice for our communities in ways historically we weren't asked to be. It was about driving tax revenue. And no longer is that enough, right? And I think how you interact in your community, build those stakeholder groups, whether it's establishing grant programs or launching new workforce development job positions, That's what these communities and my community specifically are asking of us. And I just think it's a huge opportunity for this industry to lead into new territory. And there is no roadmap for that. So take risk, bring your stakeholders along. But that term opportunity that Alana used is spot on. Don't be a protectionist. Don't protect what you have. Look for the opportunities and fill the void before your local government decides to take that responsibility off your shoulders.
And I'm just going to ask those of you, we all know you, but for those in the back that can't see you, please say who you are and where you're from, and then your comment or question.
So I'm Janice Longland. I'm the Executive Director of the Coos Bay North Bend Visitor and Convention Bureau. Oregon's Adventure Coast is our brand. I am an entity that doesn't exist anywhere else that we are aware of. I am a council of governments. I was created by the city of Coos Bay, the city of North Bend, and the Coquille Indian tribe. And so I don't fit into a government. I don't fit into a nonprofit. I don't have a 501c3. I can't get most grants. So it becomes one of those, well, who are you and how do you help? I have found that lately, people are actually listening to what we have to say because of what happened in the pandemic. And so many businesses were hurt in so many ways. But it was obvious that the industry was hurt in a greater proportion. I recently signed up for some big data, and that's now the new shiny toy. And everybody is wowed by the data I can show them. And that is starting to open some communications with people who may not have looked to tourism as that economic driver, even though we all know tourism is an economic development driver. So I'm excited to hear that TLT can be used if you can justify a trail system as a tourism facility, because I get a lot of pushback from what that 70% can be spent on. And tourism facilities in everybody's minds are visitor centers and convention centers. Well, now if we can really expand the definition of that to where we want our tourists and our visitors to go and where we want them to experience our outdoor, I mean, we're all really outdoor destinations. I mean, even Portland's got enough outdoor to make it an outdoor destination. So I appreciate that you told us about that, because that'll be one of the things I'll be taking back to my community. I didn't really have a question. It was more of a case study.
That's great. That's great. And I think, Tori? And so I'll jump in because I would want to emphasize something that Kevney and I spoke about, and it comes back to the communication piece, and that because defining the statute may not be obvious, and it may vary from community to community based upon what your project need is and what's being driven in your community, I'm sure that Bill would reinforce the most important component is going out to your stakeholders and your lodging partners and having them recognize that link. Again, so that you're not moving forward with a program that then you have your hoteliers who are collecting and remitting the tax say, hey, wait a minute, that's not how we would see the partnership. So it's just, again, getting in front of that conversation and getting your stakeholder support before you move a new initiative forward.
And I would just add to it that you gave a great example of how you show the value, right? Like you've shown up and you've said, we're here to do this. And then your shiny object is data right now, and being able to show that. Now you're providing value in the place where they have a gap, they have a need, and you had an opportunity to step into that. So I think that's a really great example of really how we probably have many of the tools that if somebody was just aware that we were the source for it, we could become a very different player in that conversation.
I want to jump on that because if there's data involved, I'm excited, as you might have heard last night. Yes, I think that's a really unique way to think about added value to the community is data and encouraging the importance of it, but also when you're collecting data, ask questions that are adjacent to what you're looking for. You know, it's expensive to get data. Travel Oregon's awesome at setting up programs and the RCTP programs to help us, and we can, with that data, we can move some really big stuff. It's getting it distilled down to the on-the-ground, city councilor or local hotelier to really use it. But when you show up and they're like, guess what? We can get some data, and they're like, oh my God, it's so expensive. And you can both maximize that partnership. It makes you look really good.
Hey, I'm Tori Middlestat. I'm with the Josephine County Visitors Association doing business as Travel Grants Pass, and we might possibly be the newest DMO in the state. Thank you. Yeah, we got our C6 letter this past week, so we're officially official. And I posed this question as I was at the RDMO in the Willamette Valley, and I always worked on kind of a feathered border because our tax collections are not collected and paid out in any sort of form of how visitors move through the state. It's by government, it's by municipalities, and it's by all this structure. So as I work in this new position of which I have a city collected tax that is very supportive of marketing the greater county and less supportive of infrastructure development on those amenities of which we are sending people and having use and could be loving to death, what advice might you have for painting that picture and recognizing that being a destination organization isn't about the lines on the map? It's about how the visitor moves, the experiences that fill the hotels, and help us move forward in our destination and protect that livability.
Great question.
I think, we just got done talking about data, and one of the reasons when we built the Bend Sustainability Fund, we made a geographic boundary of Newberry Crater to Pine Mountain to the east to Cascade Lakes Highway, was we knew by looking at Buxton and GPS data that people staying in hotels in Bend were going as far south as Crater Lake. And I think that, again, it was not us fabricating a story or sharing a false narrative. It was simply saying, these TRTs are generating here, and the purpose of that travel is something outside our UGB, and we need the ability to invest in that. And we did. To be clear, the city council struggled with that. How do we generate local tax dollars and invest them outside your urban growth boundary? But again, with good solid data and GPS data from cell phones, which is, I know it's big brother, but it's super valuable, that was our justification to say that we need to be thinking more holistically about the region and not just to our local area. So my argument would be that every destination is going to mature at a different rate. And there is going to be a tipping point in the future where something's under undue pressure and you need to invest in that. Being proactive and starting to understand what that program looks like and how to invest in that and having the data ready to justify that investment is there. And again, with the Bend Sustainability Fund, while it just came out recently, Serena, who serves as our sustainability manager, we were in talks about her joining Visit Bend for a year and a half. And this was long in the pipeline. This didn't just happen overnight. But again, it took time to get stakeholders on board for them to understand that investing in something at Mount Bachelor was in the best interest of ultimately driving heads and beds. You build that framework. So that'd be my recommendation. You see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's your job in your community to guide them through that tunnel with you.
And I would ditto that and give yourself grace in terms of that time and that development. As the newest DMO, if marketing is sexy to them and you can really deliver on that now, get some early wins in so you're building that trust, and also other people's money. So they might not be willing to invest in it, but in your unique opportunity, you might have the opportunity to facilitate a grant or some other investments coming in and advocate for it, because we all have different ways that we support these projects, right? Sometimes we own them. You said it in the videos today, right? So it's where your role is, and also to Kevin's point, your role is gonna move and it's gonna change with the needs of the community.
And as we were setting up this panel and having the preliminary conversations, Tori, and there couldn't be anyone better served to launch a new DMO than you. So Travel Grants Pass is very, very lucky. But Kevin said something really interesting to me, and there aren't any Bend City councilors in this audience, I'm sure. He said, I have, yeah, Kevin said he's thrilled to have the cell phone numbers of all of his city council members, and that he just touch points with them on a regular basis. Drop them a text, drop them a, hey, you want to grab a cup of coffee? And it is that that constant maintenance so that when the big things bubble up, you've got some stakeholders kind of already in your camp that understand where you're headed, because then you can activate them so that you're not the sole voice as your DMO trying to move an initiative, but you've already got your partners in place, so.
My name is Jared Lyman. I'm with Oregon's Mountain Hood Territory. Thanks for saying marketing is still important, Samara. I appreciate that. Making sure it's all the job. Well, yeah, that was good. Yeah, I'll pay you later. But one thought that kind of occurs to me on that front, because having worked at 3 different DMOs over the course of my career and seeing some council members similar to that, and then also a change that's happened in the course of COVID, is this almost refocus in the importance of the local visitor. And not just the people outside of that 50-mile or 6-mile or whatever sphere or circle you draw, but the local visitor as well. And one thing that can tap into the support of the council members that I've actually seen happen when you do that is help them realize that what you're doing in terms of investing in that infrastructure is also benefiting the local resident and the quality of life for them. And all of a sudden, whoa, the people who vote for me might give a rip about this and care. And I've actually seen that light turn on. I mean, it's a shame that you have to be, honestly, that cynical about it, because everybody knows how optimistic I am on things. But that cynicism in that case, it's true that you have to hit them in that very simple fact that the local people benefit as well. And which dovetails into another point I want to make is I'm hoping as maybe things get back to some semblance of a new normal, that focus on local visitor remains at the forefront, because there's been a huge benefit both in terms of the visitor and quality of life, and businesses who are seeing an influx of new customers they wouldn't have had before.
Yeah,
So I'm done.
excellent point. Great.
Shut up.
Oh my gosh. That's perfect.
George Orwell.
That's perfect.
Can I, that's awesome. This idea about having connectivity with your local leaders and touching base, I wanted to reinforce how important that is to have a texting relationship with those folks. And I would encourage you to not just meet with them to convince them of what you're doing, but ask them what's important to them and what they'd like to see happen. It turns you into advocate to move their things forward. And so they're seeing tourism as a team player outside of, what you deem to be the important message. And I think, I get texts all the time from county, we have one county commissioner that's very active. He's awesome. But, suddenly I'm like, I'm touring these people through. You got 5 minutes? I'm like, oh, okay, So, and that's not because of, me saying tourism is super valuable over and over again at the statistics. It's how are you working cooperatively to move things that are important for them forward too.
Yep. So on the most massive level, Kerry's community has spearheaded the largest event that's going to hit the U.S. Shy of the Olympics. So talking about building partnerships and gaining credibility and bringing people to the table and organizing funding sources, it's endless. And can you talk a little bit, because I know that what's now Oregon 22 started way before anybody in the industry knew what you were working on, and it's monumental.
Okay, I'll try. So we
30
bid the
seconds.
event back in 2015, and in the course of representatives from World Athletics coming in to look over this very small destination, to be convinced they wanted to come to the U.S., and really we are the heart and home of track and field in the United States. And but there are logistical challenges, and Governor Kitzhaber was in place at the time. He's the one who pledged financial support for the event, and then Governor Brown had to try and figure out how to make all that happen. But what has generated out of that, so there's a very significant investment that's come in through Travel Oregon and other state sources, and it seems, it's completely outside our character as a state to fund an event to this magnitude. But when you come to Eugene next and you travel past Hayward Field, it would not exist if we were not hosting this event. It's an extraordinary facility that was completely privately funded by 50 donors who put up a large amount of money, and it is going to be an economic engine that the investment is going to be returned so many times over for decades into the future. And we have an opportunity in the event itself, but it has catalyzed many opportunities beyond the hosting of this event. So Travel Oregon is working very hard with the local organizing committee and World Athletics and NBC to make the very most of this event on behalf of the entire state. But there will be many more opportunities into the future for compression up and down the Willamette Valley and statewide visitation. And it really is one of those instances where you're in the moment and you're like, oh my goodness, what is happening? This is just crazy. And then you get to the other side and it's ratified. It's that risk taking and leaning into season opportunity. And it's kind of like what happened to us in 2008 when we brought the Olympic track and field trials back for the first time in 28 years. When I got to Eugene, I said, why aren't we hosting these anymore? And even the most ardent track fans were like, no, those were way outside our grasp. We can't do those anymore. Well, we brought the event back in 2008 and did it better than it had ever been done before. And that self-belief and the recognition that you can do things bigger than you thought you could. We're a very humble place. We're very modest, and we all hold that value to some degree, and we care about that value. But there are times when it's okay to lean in and rise above, and the logistics of this event are extraordinary, but the outcomes are really going to be special for the state for a long time. Now I just need an indoor track to fill January, February, March, and then we are rolling, baby.
Sounds like a tourism facility. So I noticed that we're coming up on our deadline for the end of the session. Are there any other comments or questions from the group that this esteemed panel can address today?
We can also do it over beers.
Okay, we could do that.
We're very
Yeah, the new keyword. So obviously, if you need contact information for any of these folks, I'm happy to give that to you after the session. But we are motivated to continue to stay unified as a destination community. I'm not going to even add any letters after it because it is definitely an evolution for all of us. But we're really happy to see a full room and so many people that are invested in this conversation. And we look forward to carrying it forward. I know that there are several other breakout sessions throughout the conference that are going to touch on some of these themes, workforce being one of them, and across the gamut. So we look forward to connecting with you over the next couple of days. Thank you so much.